All right, let's get right into it. Ever wonder what's actually going on inside a tool like ChatGPT? Well, today we are popping the hood and taking a look at the incredible engine that makes it all run. We're going to take a journey into the brain of the AI to really understand the revolutionary piece of tech at its core, the transformer. So here's how we're going to break this all down. We're just going to follow the data, step by step. We'll start by decoding what GPT even means, then see how language gets turned into numbers a computer can actually understand. From there, we'll hit the core processing loop, figure out its ultimate goal, and finally see how it all pulls together to have a full-on conversation. First things first, what do those letters GPT actually stand for? Turns out, the name itself gives us a perfect little roadmap to understanding the whole thing. It's all right there. Generative just means it can create new stuff, in this case text. Pre-trained tells us it's already learned from a truly massive amount of text data. But the T, now that's the real secret sauce, transformer. That's the specific blueprint for the machine, the engine that makes it all possible. And this isn't just about chatbots. The transformer architecture is the engine behind a huge explosion in AI. We're talking language translation, creating these incredible images from just a text prompt, transcribing audio, even generating realistic synthetic voices. It is a truly foundational piece of modern technology. Okay, so how does this all get started? Well, to get a machine to understand anything, you first have to translate our very human language into its native tongue, which is, of course, numbers. So how on earth does that work? The whole process kicks off by chopping up the text you give it into smaller pieces. These are called tokens. A token could be a whole word like apple, or just part of a word like the ing in running, or even just a comma. Then, each of those little tokens gets looked up in this giant, pre-made dictionary, and it's assigned a long, long list of numbers. This list is called a vector, or an embedding. The whole point of this vector is to numerically represent the meaning of that token. Think of it like a set of GPS coordinates that pinpoints a word's meaning on a giant map. And here's where it gets kind of mind-blowing. This map of meaning is actually structured in a way that makes sense. The relationships between words can be navigated. The classic example is this. The direction from the vector from man to woman is almost the exact same as the direction from king to queen. You can literally do math with the meaning of words. It's wild. And when I say this is a giant dictionary, I mean it's colossal. For a model like GPT-3, this initial map of words, the embedding matrix, has over 617 million different values, or parameters. Think of them like tiny little knobs, each one helping to fine-tune the precise location of a word's meaning. Okay, so our words are now vectors, points on a map. We've officially reached the heart of the transformer. This is where those vectors get processed, where they get to soak in the context of the whole sentence around them. In this whole process is a really elegant two-step dance, and it just repeats over and over. First, in what's called the attention block, all the word vectors basically talk to each other. They look around and figure out which other words are most important for understanding context. Then, in the feed-forward layer, each word takes that new information and thinks about it on its own. Now, for all this fancy talk of talking and thinking, what's really happening under the hood? It's just math. Pure mathematics. It's a massive cascading series of matrix multiplications, transforming these vectors again and again and again. And the scale is just hard to even comprehend. The full GPT-3 model has 175 billion of these tunable parameters. That's 175 billion knobs and dials that were all perfectly tuned during its training phase to make sure this whole process works. So let's pause for a second. We have this absolutely insane machine doing billions of calculations. But why? What is all this processing actually for? What is the model trying to do? Well, it turns out its goal is surprisingly simple. After all that work, after all that thinking and talking, it looks at the very last vector in the sequence and uses it to do just one thing: predict the most likely next word. That's it. To do this, it takes the raw, kind of messy output scores from the network and funnels them through one last step called a softmax function. You can think of it like a cleanup crew that turns a jumbled list of numbers into a perfectly clean probability distribution, giving every single word in its vocabulary a percentage chance of being the next one. And you've probably seen a temperature setting on some of these AI tools, right? Well, this is exactly what you're fiddling with. A low temperature makes the model play it safe and always pick the most obvious, highest probability word. Turn the temperature up and you're giving the less likely, more creative words a chance to be picked. It can lead to more interesting results, but also risks just becoming nonsense. Okay, let's bring it all home. We now know the model's entire job is to just predict one single word. So how does that turn into the long, coherent answers we actually get from a chatbot? This is the real magic trick. The model predicts one word. It then picks a word from its list of probabilities, and it sticks that new word onto the end of the text it already has. Then, and this is the genius part, it takes that entire, now slightly longer sentence and feeds it right back into the machine to do the whole process all over again. And that simple loop, predict, add, repeat, is exactly what you are watching when you see a chatbot typing out its response. That streaming text isn't just some cool animation. You are literally watching the model think, one word at a time. Now, this loop can't go on forever. These models have a fixed context size, which is the maximum amount of text they can look at one time. For the original GPT-3, that was 2,048 tokens. And that's why, if you've ever had a really long conversation with an older chatbot, it might seem to forget what you talked about at the beginning. It's because that early text literally fell out of its memory window. So when you peel back all the layers, when you look past the 175 billion parameters and the mind-bending math, you find this surprisingly simple goal at the very center of it all. It's an incredibly sophisticated engine for guessing the next word. And that leaves us with a really fascinating and maybe even profound question to chew on. If a machine gets this good at predicting language, is it truly understanding? Or is it just an unbelievably powerful illusion?